Daniel sat on the bus, staring out the window as the world passed by. It was a typical evening in the city, the kind where nothing seemed special. He had just finished his usual day at work, a job that drained him more than it fulfilled him. As a financial analyst, he spent his days crunching numbers and looking at graphs that never seemed to make any real difference. He often wondered what it would be like to live a life full of excitement, adventure, and meaning. But for now, he was just another face in the crowd, going through the motions of life, day in and day out. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. A notification from his best friend Leo popped up. "Have you seen this yet? Turn on the news." Daniel sighed and opened the app. The headline on the screen made his heart skip a beat. Unidentified flying object spotted over the city. He quickly clicked on the link and found live footage of a massive craft hovering over the skyline. It was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Shiny, sleek, and impossibly large. It defied the rules of physics. The newscaster's voice crackled with excitement and panic. "Unprecedented sighting! Authorities have confirmed that this is not a military craft. We urge everyone to stay inside until we know more. Please remain calm." Daniel's stomach tightened. Was this real? Was this just some kind of elaborate hoax? He kept watching as the footage showed the craft descending slowly, the city below it buzzing with chaos. People were running, cars were honking, and others were recording the scene on their phones. But what really caught his attention was the bright light that seemed to pulse from the craft, illuminating the entire area with a strange, unnatural glow. The whole city seemed to stop, as if frozen in time. The bus jerked to a stop, and Daniel's mind snapped back to the present. "The driver?" announced the next stop, but Daniel barely noticed. He stepped off the bus, his eyes still glued to the glowing sky. He felt a strange pull, a force urging him to go towards the center of the city, where the light seemed to grow brighter. Without thinking, Daniel turned around and started walking. The crowd was thick with people heading in the same direction, all of them looking up at the spectacle above. His curiosity pushed him forward, his steps growing quicker as he felt an odd sense of anticipation. Something was happening, something he couldn't understand, but it felt important. He had to see it for himself. As Daniel neared the city square, he saw the craft up close for the first time. It was even more magnificent than the videos had shown, hovering just above the ground with no visible means of support. People gathered beneath it, eyes wide with awe and fear. A loud hum filled the air, and Daniel could feel the vibrations in his chest. Suddenly, the hum shifted, and a beam of light shot out from the center of the craft, bathing the square in its eerie glow. The crowd gasped, stepping back, but Daniel couldn't tear his eyes away. It was as if the light was calling to him, pulling him forward. He didn't know why, but he found himself walking towards the center of the beam. As he crossed the threshold of the light, everything around him seemed to fade away. The noise of the crowd disappeared, and the world around him grew hazy. His heartbeat raced, his breath shallow, as he felt himself being lifted off the ground. Daniel's feet left the earth. He wasn't flying, but it felt like he was being drawn upwards, as though the very air itself was pulling him into the craft. His heart pounded in his chest as his mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Was this a dream? Was he going mad? But then, everything went silent. The world seemed to stop, and for a moment, Daniel thought he had fallen unconscious. He couldn't remember how long he had been floating in the beam of light, but now he was standing on solid ground once more. Looking around, Daniel realized he was no longer in the city. The skyline had disappeared, replaced by a vast, unfamiliar landscape. He was standing in a large chamber, the walls smooth and metallic, pulsing with a soft light. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, and the ground beneath his feet was cool and smooth. Before he could take it all in, a voice spoke. It was soft, yet commanding, carrying an air of power and authority. "You are Daniel, correct?" Daniel froze. The voice came from all around him, echoing through the chamber. He didn't know what to say. Was this some sort of, elaborate prank? Had he been abducted by aliens? It seemed too crazy to be true, yet everything he saw told him otherwise. Who are you? He stammered, trying to sound calm but failing. Where am I? A figure stepped forward, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She was tall, elegant, and unmistakably alien. Her skin shimmered with a faint iridescence, her eyes glowing with a strange, intense light. She wore regal, flowing robes that seemed to ripple with energy as she moved. Her beauty was otherworldly, but there was something else in her presence, something both intimidating and commanding. I am Queen Alara of Sinthara, she said, her voice both soft and powerful. And you, Daniel, are my chosen consort. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't understand what she meant. Chosen consort? Was this a joke? Had he stumbled into some kind of sci-fi movie? But the look in her eyes told him she wasn't playing games. She was serious. Before he could speak, she continued, I have chosen you, Daniel, to be my husband. Your bloodline has been deemed worthy, and you will stand beside me as my equal. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to say. This was impossible, wasn't it? He was just a regular guy living a normal life. How could this alien queen choose him? I know this is difficult to comprehend, Queen Alara said, her voice calm, as if she had dealt with this reaction many times before. But it is not just a marriage. It is a union between our people, an alliance that could save my world. Daniel shook his head, still in shock. I'm just an ordinary man. Why me? Alara's gaze softened.
Because you are the one I have chosen, there is no more to say.
You are mine, Daniel. The words hung in the air between them, and Daniel stood there, unsure of what to do. Part of him wanted to run, to wake up from what seemed like a nightmare. But another part of him, the part he didn't fully understand, felt a strange pull toward her. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a joke. Somehow, impossibly, he was here. You will come with me, Alara said, her tone brokering no argument. There is much to learn, and we have little time. Before Daniel could respond, the world around him seemed to shift again. The chamber began to glow, and he felt himself being pulled forward. He had no choice but to follow the alien queen into whatever awaited him. He had no idea what kind of life lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. His ordinary life was over. Daniel had no idea what was happening to him. He felt like he was trapped in a dream, but every sensation he experienced told him it was real. The air around him was different, thicker and somehow charged, as if the very atmosphere was alive with energy. He could feel the subtle hum beneath the surface of the ground, and the walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm. His surroundings had changed completely from the streets of the city, yet it was all so vivid, so clear, it couldn't be anything but real. Queen Alara, the alien who had chosen him, stood beside him, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. She was calm, collected, and radiated an aura of power that made Daniel feel both awestruck and intimidated. Her presence was almost overwhelming, like a force that demanded respect without a single word. Come with me, she instructed softly, leading him forward. The corridor they entered was vast, stretching out before them, lined with smooth metallic walls. It was sleek, modern, and somehow ancient, all at once. The walls shimmered with faint blue light, and strange symbols danced across the surfaces, moving like living creatures. Daniel couldn't help but stare at them, feeling a sense of wonder creeping up his spine. Where was he? And why had he been brought here? As they walked, Alara turned to him. I know this is overwhelming, she said in her deep, melodic voice. But you will understand soon enough. There is no need for fear. You are safe here, Daniel. He wasn't sure if he felt safe. The whole situation felt like a bad joke. Just a few hours ago, he had been sitting in his dull office, going through the same routine he had done every day for years. Now he was in a strange alien world, chosen by an alien queen who claimed he was her consort. Nothing about this made sense, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt when she spoke to him. There was something comforting about her voice, something that made him trust her, even when he didn't fully understand why. "Why me?" Daniel asked, his voice quieter than he intended. "I'm just an ordinary man. I don't have anything special about me." Elara smiled, a soft, knowing expression on her face. "You are special, Daniel. Not because of what you think you lack, but because of who you are. Your bloodline is unique in ways that even I cannot explain fully, but it is undeniable." Daniel was about to protest, to tell her that he was just a guy from Earth with no special talents or skills. But Elara raised a hand, stopping him. "There is more to you than you realize," she continued. "Your species has the potential for greatness, and it is this potential that has led me to choose you. Not just for your strength, but for your heart. You have qualities that my people need, and that is why I have selected you." Daniel shook his head in confusion. "But why me?"
There must be someone else who... No, Elara interrupted gently. There is no one else.
"It is you, Daniel, and you must come to accept that." She paused before continuing. "This isn't just a marriage of convenience. This is a union between two worlds, two species. Your people and mine. Together, we can save my world." Daniel tried to process her words, but they seemed impossible. How could he possibly help her save her world? He didn't even know what was going on. He was just a regular guy from Earth, now thrown into this alien situation with a woman who claimed he was her consort. "Where am I?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. "Where is this place?" "This is Synthara," Elara answered, her voice steady and full of pride. "My home. My people have lived here for centuries, but we are on the verge of extinction. Our enemies are powerful, and our numbers have dwindled over the years. It is only through alliances with other species that we can survive." She paused, turning to face him fully. "And now, with you by my side, we have a chance." Daniel felt the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't just about him. This wasn't some strange fantasy or dream he could wake up from. It was real. He was here to help save her people. He didn't know how, or even if he could, but the gravity of the situation was too large to ignore. They continued walking down the corridors, and Daniel noticed the advanced technology all around them. There were large glowing panels on the walls, some of them flashing with strange symbols and data he couldn't understand. The air smelled faintly of something unfamiliar, like a mix of herbs and ozone, and the faint hum of machinery filled the space, making it seem alive. Elara led him into a large room at the end of the hall, where he saw several others, figures dressed in elaborate, shimmering armor, their faces stern and watchful. Daniel could feel their eyes on him, appraising him with curiosity and suspicion. They looked nothing like the people he knew back on Earth. They were tall, their features sharp and regal, their skin marked with intricate tattoos that glowed faintly. "These are my closest advisors," Elara explained, turning to him. "They are the leaders of my people. They will guide you in the ways of Synthara and help you understand your new role." One of the figures, a tall man with silver hair and glowing amber eyes, stepped forward. His gaze was intense, and Daniel felt a chill run through him. "Queen Elara," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly, "is this the human? The one you have chosen?" Elara nodded, her posture confident. "Yes, this is Daniel. He is to be my consort, and he will help us secure the future of Synthara." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Daniel could feel the weight of the scrutiny bearing down on him. He didn't belong here. He didn't understand the language, the customs, or the politics of this alien world. But something in Elara's voice told him that this was his fate now. This was the path he had to follow, whether he understood it or not. "Elara!" Another figure spoke. A woman with pale skin and dark, glowing eyes. Are you sure this is the right choice?
This human is untested. He doesn't even know our ways.
I am sure, Elara replied firmly. Daniel will learn. He has the strength inside him that we need.
The advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke further.
Elara turned back to Daniel, her expression softening once more.
You are part of my world now, Daniel. You will learn what it means to be my consort.
And when the time comes, you will help lead my people to a better future. Daniel swallowed, feeling a lump form in his throat. The responsibility was too much for him to fully grasp, but he knew one thing. There was no going back. He had been chosen, and he had to step into this role, no matter how impossible it seemed. How will I learn? Daniel asked, his voice uncertain. I don't know anything about this world. How can I possibly help? Alara's eyes softened with compassion. We will begin your training soon.
I understand what
I will teach you about our history, our customs, and the dangers that threaten us. But first, you must rest. This is a lot to take in, and you need to gather your strength. Daniel nodded, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He was scared, unsure, and completely out of his depth. But somewhere, deep inside, he felt something stir, a faint flicker of hope. He had been chosen for a reason, even if he didn't fully understand why. He had to trust that Elara knew what she was doing. She had already chosen him once. Maybe, just maybe, he could do something to help. As Elara led him to a private room, the weight of the moment settled upon him. The unknown stretched out before him, and he had no idea what would happen next. But one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. Daniel's first days on Synthara were a blur of strange lessons, overwhelming sights, and constant reminders of just how far from home he truly was. The corridors of the palace seemed endless, and no matter where he went, he couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The city outside, with its towering spires and glowing streets, was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet it felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. There was something about the energy in the air that made him feel alive, even though he was still struggling to find his footing. Queen Elara, despite her imposing presence, was surprisingly patient with him. She guided him through the rituals and customs of her world, teaching him how to navigate the complex politics of Synthara. The alien queen was unlike any person Daniel had ever met, graceful, intelligent, and commanding. Her voice alone could silence a room. But she also had a kindness about her that Daniel couldn't quite understand. She seemed to genuinely care about him, not just because he was her chosen consort, but because she believed in him. And for the first time in his life, Daniel started to believe in himself too. The first lesson was about the history of Synthara and the challenges it had faced over the centuries. The people of Synthara, a once powerful and prosperous race, had been brought to the brink of extinction by a relentless enemy, the Zorathians. These invaders, ruthless and technologically superior, had been waging war against Synthara for as long as anyone could remember. Their endless attacks had decimated the population, leaving only a small fraction of the once great civilization. Daniel listened intently as Elara spoke of her people's struggle, her voice filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. The Zorathians, she explained, were not just a military threat. They were a plague. Their technology was so advanced that it could strip entire planets of their resources in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing behind but lifeless husks. Synthara had been fortunate enough to survive as long as it had, but the queen knew their time was running out. They will come for us again, Elara said one evening, her tone somber as they sat together in the royal library. And next time, they will not stop until we are completely gone. Daniel had trouble grasping the magnitude of her words. He was just an ordinary man from Earth, yet here he was, being thrust into a battle to save an entire species. How could he possibly help? He had no military training, no knowledge of advanced alien technologies, and certainly no experience with the kind of warfare Ilara was talking about. But Ilara was insistent. "You are not ordinary," she had told him. "You have something inside you that can change the course of this war." She didn't explain what she meant by that, and Daniel wasn't sure if she was just trying to reassure him. But somehow, the words stuck with him. Maybe there was more to him than he realized. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. As the days passed, Daniel's training began in earnest. Ilara introduced him to some of the brightest minds of Synthara. There was Jaxar, a brilliant engineer who specialized in alien technology, Nira, a skilled strategist with a sharp mind for warfare, and Kellen, a diplomat who had spent years navigating the complex relationships between various factions on Synthara. Each of them had a role to play in the survival of their people, and they all became Daniel's teachers in one way or another. At first, the lessons were overwhelming. Jaxar taught him how to operate advanced Syntharan technology, devices that seemed like something out of a science fiction movie yet were very real. He spent hours learning the basics: how to use a translator to communicate in Syntharan, how to operate energy shields, and how to pilot small craft. But the most difficult lesson of all was learning to understand the mindset of the Zorathians. They weren't just enemies. They were a force of nature, relentless and unforgiving. If they had their way, Synthara would be wiped from existence, and Daniel couldn't afford to underestimate them. Nira's lessons focused on strategy, teaching him the importance of thinking several steps ahead. "In war," she told him, "it's not just about strength. It's about finding the weaknesses, exploiting them, and using your enemy's fear against them." Daniel spent countless hours poring over maps and simulations, studying the movements of the Zorathians and looking for patterns in their attacks. It was a complicated, often tedious process, but he was slowly beginning to see how it all fit together. Kellen's lessons were more about diplomacy and leadership. She taught him how to navigate the complicated web of politics that held Synthara together. Ilara, despite her power, needed allies to survive, and Daniel was expected to help forge these alliances. "You will lead by example," Kellen explained, "and you must earn the respect of the people, both your own and the other species who might join us in this fight. If you fail them, the entire galaxy will fall." As the weeks turned into months, Daniel's life on Synthara began to settle into a strange routine. The alien queen had given him a purpose, and the people around him were starting to treat him not just as her consort, but as a leader in his own right. He wasn't just training anymore. He was actively participating in the planning of the defense of Synthara. His voice, though quiet at first, began to carry weight. He began to believe in his own potential, though doubt still crept in when he was alone. Could he really live up to the expectations of a queen, of an entire world? But it wasn't just the politics or the war that kept him occupied. There was something else, something deeper, that kept him tethered to this strange new world. It was his growing connection with Ilara. At first, their relationship had been purely transactional. She needed him for an alliance, and he needed her guidance to survive. But as they spent more time together, Daniel began to see another side of her. Ilara was not just a ruler or a symbol of power. She was a person with fears, hopes, and dreams. She cared deeply for her people, and it was clear that the weight of their survival rested heavily on her shoulders. One evening, after a long day of lessons, Daniel found himself alone with Ilara in her private chamber. They sat together in silence, watching the stars outside the window. The soft light of the twin moons bathed the room in a gentle glow. "You've come a long way," Ilara said, breaking the silence. "You're no longer the man who arrived here weeks ago. You're becoming a leader." Daniel shifted uncomfortably.
"I'm just trying to do what's best for everyone," she smiled softly. "That's all any leader can do."
"You have a good heart, Daniel." He looked at her, unsure of how to respond. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I'm just a man from Earth. I don't have the experience."
Ilara turned to face him, her eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. "You are more than that."
"You are my consort, and together We will save my people. Daniel met her gaze and, for the first time, saw the full weight of what he had been chosen to do. There was no turning back. He had made a choice. And whether he was ready or not, he would fight for Cinthara, for Alara, and for the future of their world. As the days passed, Daniel's bond with Alara grew stronger. He learned not just about strategy or leadership, but about the woman who had chosen him. She was strong, yes, but also vulnerable in ways he hadn't expected. She was burdened by the fate of her people, and the pressure weighed on her every decision. But in those quiet moments between lessons and battles, Daniel saw a different side to her. She laughed, even if it was only for a moment. She smiled when he made an awkward comment or tried to understand Cintheran humor. In those moments, she wasn't the queen of a dying world. She was just Alara, the woman who had chosen him. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt like he belonged somewhere. The future was still uncertain, the path ahead still fraught with danger. But in Alara's presence, Daniel began to feel a sense of purpose. He was no longer just an ordinary man. He was part of something far greater than himself, something that could change the course of an entire world. And he was ready to fight for it. The battle for Cinthara had begun. Daniel had never imagined that his life would come to this. Only a few months ago, he had been an ordinary man, sitting at a desk in a city that felt so far from this alien world. Now he was standing in the heart of a war, leading troops, making decisions, and standing beside Queen Alara, who had chosen him to be her consort, her equal. But the weight of the title was more than he had ever anticipated. Cinthara was on the brink of collapse. The Zorathians, relentless in their pursuit of the planet, had launched another massive invasion. This time, they were not just attacking one city or one region. They were coming for the entire planet. The small forces that Cinthara had left were no match for the Zorathians' superior technology and strength. The Zorathians had a fleet that could level entire cities with a single strike, and their soldiers were ruthless. Daniel had witnessed the destruction firsthand. The sky above Cinthara's capital was darkened with the smoke of burning buildings, and the streets were filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions. He had been thrust into the heart of the war, standing alongside Alara as she made strategic decisions. But this wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was about survival. As Alara's consort, Daniel had been given a seat at the table with the military leaders of Cinthara. He had learned to make difficult choices, to weigh the cost of every decision. They were fighting for more than just a planet. They were fighting for their way of life, for the future of an entire species. And in that moment, Daniel realized how much it all meant, how much he had come to care for these people and their queen. He stood next to Alara in the war room, watching as the holographic maps displayed the advancing Zorathian forces. The light from the projections flickered across Alara's face, casting shadows that seemed to age her. She had been through so much, yet she carried the burden of leadership with grace. But Daniel could see the toll it was taking on her. He had seen the cracks in her armor, the moments when the weight of responsibility threatened to break her. Alara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "We can't hold them back for long," she said, her voice calm but laced with worry. "The Zorathians are relentless. We've lost contact with several cities and they're advancing faster than we anticipated." Daniel's heart sank. He had been hoping for a miracle, some way to turn the tide, but the reality of the situation was clear. Cinthara was losing, fast. "We have to do something," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his heart. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to take everything." Alara looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And what would you suggest, Daniel? We don't have the numbers or the resources to fight them head on. We need a plan, a strategy that will give us the upper hand." Daniel's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier, and he wasn't a strategist, but he had learned a lot from his time on Cinthara. He had learned about the Zorathians' weaknesses, their patterns of attack, and the technology they used. Maybe he didn't have the experience of someone like Nira or Kellen, but he had something else. He had a fresh perspective, and sometimes that was the most important thing. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Daniel said slowly. "We don't have the firepower to take them on directly, but we can disrupt their supply lines. If we can cut off their resources, force them to retreat, or spread themselves too thin, it might give us a fighting chance." Elara looked at him, her brow furrowed in thought. Disrupt their supply lines? That could work. But the Zorathians are always on the move. Their ships are fast, and they have advanced stealth technology. It won't be easy to get close enough. "I know," Daniel said. "But we have a few advantages they don't. We've learned from their patterns. We know where they're weakest. And we have something they don't: human ingenuity. I've seen how Synthara's technology can work when it's used creatively. Maybe we can build something that can take them by surprise." Elara studied him for a long moment, her piercing gaze seeming to weigh his words. Then, finally, she nodded. "You're right. We don't have the luxury of time. If we don't act soon, Synthara will fall. Prepare yourself, Daniel." "You will lead this mission." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He was going to lead a mission? He wasn't a soldier. He was just a man who had been swept up into a war he didn't fully understand. But there was no turning back. Elara believed in him, and that belief had to count for something. As the days passed, Daniel worked alongside the best minds Synthara had to offer. He spent hours in the war room, poring over maps and simulations. He met with Jaxar, the engineer, and together they designed a series of stealth ships capable of slipping past Zorathian sensors. These ships would be small, fast, and heavily shielded, designed to blend in with the surroundings and avoid detection. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best shot. Nira, the strategist, helped Daniel plan the operation. She showed him how to read battle formations, how to anticipate enemy movements. Together they devised a plan to infiltrate Zorathian supply lines, to sabotage their ships and cripple their ability to wage war. The mission was dangerous, far more so than anything Daniel had ever done, but it was their only chance. When the day of the mission arrived, Daniel stood on the launch pad, surrounded by the crew who would accompany him. They were all nervous, their faces drawn with fear, but they were also determined. They knew what was at stake. Elara stood beside him, her eyes filled with pride and concern. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "You could stay here. Let someone else take the risk." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not going to sit back while my people fight. This is my fight, too." She looked at him for a long moment, and then, without a word, she embraced him. It wasn't a formal gesture, but something deeper, a connection that went beyond duty or politics. It was a simple human gesture, and in that moment, Daniel realized how much he had come to care for her, not just as his queen, but as the woman who had shown him a purpose.
"You will return to me," Elara said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We need you."
Daniel nodded, his heart pounding. There was no turning back now. He was committed to this mission, committed to the fight for Synthara's survival. As the small fleet of stealth ships launched into the sky, Daniel looked out at the battlefield below. The Zorathians were everywhere, their ships hovering above the planet like a dark cloud. The fight was about to begin. They had a chance, but it wasn't guaranteed. Every step they took could be their last. But Daniel was no longer just the ordinary man who had stumbled into an alien world. He was a leader, and this time, he would do whatever it took to win. The ships flew into the night, cutting through the atmosphere with precision. Daniel could only hope that their gamble would pay off, that their ingenuity would be enough to turn the tide in this desperate war. He knew the stakes, and he knew what failure would mean. Synthara couldn't afford to lose, and neither could he.